718 win 1 2 3 4. We're going to go Rabbi Jacobson. We're going to go straight
for
back.
those people that you sent in the tweets before with the questions for Rabbi Jacobson, send them in again. If you don't see it on the screen, we don't see it.
Right.
So send it in again. I am not sitting here writing them all down.
There you go. Somebody writes here, what can a parent or teacher do to make the children excited to daven? Davening, you want to give the kids a chiyus in davening.
You bring up a very important and sometimes painful subject because, to be blunt and honest, children and adults very often experience davening as extremely, extremely monotonous and boring. I think there's a few things. Number one, before davening, there could be a short little discussion every day, even 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Tell the children an inspiring story that relates to davening. Explain a line of davening. Explain a section of davening. So through the year, through the month, they stretch out a davening, and for a particular age, it's simply too long. And I think every parent and every child, every educator, we have to be extremely creative to be able to allow our children to feel and experience an intimate relationship with Hashem. Maybe the greatest gift a parent and an educator can give a child or a student is the ability for them to feel that they have a personal, intimate relationship with Hashem.
Incredible. Yes, not always so easy, but definitely, I guess we all got to, even as adults, we got to work on it.
Not even, precisely as adults.
There you go, thank you.
Only a father and mother who have a real relationship with God, I think, can impart that to children in an authentic way. It's very hard to give your child something that for you is very alien, because children are very sensitive to truth and honesty. They pick up on things immediately.
How do I help my child have a mind of their own, not always looking at what their friends are doing?
It's actually a student they're asking. It looks like it's a teacher, I think.
Right.
That's different.
Is it different?
Competition with the marks.
That's a wonderful question. One of the better lines I've once heard is, we're all born as originals and most of us die as copies. I think it's important.
It's a great line.
I think it's important to communicate to our children that individuality is not only a luxury, it's a duty. The Rabbi Shalom made every person differently because he wants every person to be different. Chazal tell us in Sanhedrin, Ein Deyesei and Shabbos, no two mindsets are alike. It's not a mistake. That's part of the design. In other words, I have my light that I bring into the world, but you have your light that you bring into the world through your resources, your mind, your heart, your neshama, and your individual circumstances. So it's not only a luxury thing for you to think on your own. It's a duty, it's a responsibility for you to fully express your presence in this world, because your presence is a unique expression of Hashem's light that nobody else can substitute.
This one is a little bit sensitive, but I think it's an important one. If you suspect your child is doing something inappropriate, yet you aren't sure, should you broach it? On the other hand, you don't want to educate him.
But
if yes, you can't ignore it. I mean, if he's doing something inappropriate, you don't want to ignore it. On the other hand, if he's not, you don't want to educate him.
You suspect, but you're not sure.
Listen, the greatest medicine is proactive medicine, not damage control. I think it's important for all parents and educators to understand when your children reach a certain age, girls and boys, they need to have a conversation with Tati and Mommy about the changes their bodies go through. We cannot afford to allow our 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds to learn about the intimate parts of life through friends or through the internet. That can be very damaging. This is an obligation on a parent, fathers with boys usually, mothers with girls, to explain your child, your bar mitzvah boy, your 12-year-old girl, whatever it is, how Hashem designed the body. of course, age appropriate, but you want to empower them. They shouldn't be afraid of all the sudden changes they're going to experience, and then they have to go other places to find out what's happening. You want to be able to have these conversations with them and bond with them, and be able to communicate the system of how creation works and how Hashem created us in a productive, in a meaningful way, to give them the Torah approach of how to deal with their own body and appreciate it and respect it and not be afraid of the changes. Now, if you are dealing with damage control, in other words, we're not dealing with l'chatchila, we're dealing with b'diavad, there is a way of having a conversation with your child without suspecting them and without denigrating them and without judging them. You want to have as open as possible a conversation with your child about where they're at, how they're experiencing life. And this can only come if there's a tight relationship, if there's an ongoing conversation, if there's trust, if the child doesn't feel fear that if he or she is honest with you, they're going to be judged and denigrated and not loved the same. So it's extremely important to invest in continuous communication with our children. There's a beautiful vart from the Helika Lechavitcher, extraordinary vart. He says, Hashem tells Noach, he says, there's a mabul, there's a flood, boya la teva. Go into the teva. And who should you bring into the teva? You and your wife and your children and their wives. Says the Lechavitcher, the word teva means a box, a boat, but teva also means a word, like Rosh Teva is teva. When there is a flood out there in the world, boy el hateva, it's important to enter into a dialogue with your family. When there's a flood all over the place, don't expect that they're going to learn everything on their own. You have to have conversations with them. Boya la teva, enter into the words. You need an ongoing dialogue with your family, an ongoing dialogue with your children. Listen to them, communicate to them, because there's a big mabul out there.
All right. You have a question?
Somebody writes, thank you for answering all our questions. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. How don't I give over the dysfunction?
Listen, this is a gewaldige question. First of all, I'm sorry to hear this. The first blessing that you have is that you're aware of it. You're aware of the challenge. You're aware of the problem. I think it's extremely important for a person like yourself to seek the help that you need to feel happy, to feel empowered. If you will feel happy and empowered, I think naturally you'll be able to transfer that to your children. Don't be overcritical of yourself and don't doubt everything you do. But be aware of your shortcomings. Be aware of where your own dysfunction may be playing a role. And you should have one or two people in your life whom you trust, and you could pick up a telephone and you could consult a mentor, a good friend, a colleague, a therapist, a rabbi, whoever it is, somebody that's trust, mature. You could pick up a phone and you say, this and this happened last night. This and this happened this morning between me and my husband, me and my wife, me and my daughter, me and my son, me and whoever. This is how I reacted. Be aware, seek out the help that you need, and nurture your own identity. Find your own real relationship with God. David HaMelech says, Ki avi v'imi azavuni v'Hashem ya'asveni. In Tehillim Perek Chav Zayin. My father and mother abandoned me. Hashem took me in. David HaMelech here was empowering millions and billions of people who grew up in dysfunctional homes, unfortunately, that they should be able to find a very powerful relationship with God and His unconditional love to them as individuals. So at least on some level they can recreate a functional identity. And remember, it's extremely important for you not to blame yourself, not to feel guilty. Most important is to identify the dysfunction. Meaning, if your child says something to you and suddenly you're triggered with a crazy dysfunctional emotion, you want to hit them, you want to run away from the house, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're annoyed, you want to kill them, and so on and so forth. These are human emotions. They exist. As long as you can identify them and realize that they're coming from your lower self, not from your higher self, you can then quarantine them and make sure that you don't allow these emotions to control your behavior, your words, your deeds. And then you are in a pretty good place.
So how do I implement the balance of sticking to my principles yet letting our children not be different if everybody is doing it? Thank you, Rabbi Jacobson.
That's
the listeners, they have good questions.
Yeah, very good questions. I mean, the questions are coming from life. It's a wonderful question, I'll tell you. Don't impose these principles in a self-righteous way. You know, we're the frum ones and everybody else are the bad ones. We're the holier-than-thou tzaddikim and everybody else are the spiritual losers who are going straight to hell. If you do that, you're just going to create negative energy in the house. What you want to do is empower your children. They should understand where you're coming from. Let them be partners with your priorities. Let them identify with your priorities. Let your priorities become their priorities. To quote Rashi from the Gemara, "Shetahei shalheves oila me'eleha." Don't hold the match by the wick. That's not chinuch. You have to allow the flame to rise on its own, even when you take away the match. Education is not me telling my child what he or she cannot do. Education is me inculcating within my child their own sensitivity and understanding of the proper values in life. And you also sometimes have to know when to be flexible. Don't become stubborn on priorities. What the Gemara would say, "Ein goizrin gzeira al." You have to understand who your child is. On the other hand, sometimes just because everybody does it, it doesn't mean it's good. Just because everybody does it, it could be that they're doing something stupid. And you don't have to always degrade yourself to what everybody does. So it's extremely important to know this, especially when it comes to issues, you know, sometimes teenagers have to copy each other. And there are teenagers who are allowed by their parents to have things and do things that really don't help their lives. Do not allow your child to subject himself to such dangers just because of social pressure.
Anyway, thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson. I know we got a lot more questions.
Some really good ones.
Yeah, some really good ones. It's a shame. You know, I know we're having another segment, but
one more segment,
right, but not necessarily not going to be with some of these questions. But thank you so much. Thank you for the listeners for texting and tweeting in, and we appreciate it. And, you know, Rabbi Jacobson, it's amazing how it's you know, I was listening to a lot of what you were saying. I think part of it is also consistency, and I noticed there was a consistency in what you were saying, and I think that's a big part of it.
It's a good sign.
Right? No, I was saying
somebody once told me about themselves, I am consistently inconsistent. It's good to be consistently consistent. But sometimes it's good to be inconsistent too.
Very good. Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson. Anyway,
I'll tell you something, a very nice word. There was an educator who once went into the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he wrote a book on education, The 100 Principles of Education. So the Rebbe read them fast, and he said, you're missing principle 101. He said, what is that? He said that in chinuch, there are no klalim. He had 100 klalim for chinuch. He said, there's one more klal. The klal is that there's no klal. So if there's no klal, erase the first 100. No. There are klalim in chinuch, but there's one more klal in chinuch, and that is that there's no klalim. Take care of your child. Sometimes your child needs something that the other children don't need. Don't always follow the klalim. Sometimes you got to break the klalim for your child, and nobody will do it if not the parents.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson.